Hello and welcome to MEELive. I'm Matilda Mallinson. It's Thursday, the 29th of January, 2026. Today, is Iran on the brink of war and revolution? Here's the latest. A massive armada is heading to Iran, in the words of US President Donald Trump, following the steady buildup of US military forces in the Gulf. It comes as Iran's government carries out a ruthless crackdown against protesters after Trump previously promised them help is on the way. But Trump's most recent threats of imminent war make no mention of the protests, instead calling on the Iranian government to partake in nuclear negotiations. He tore up a previous nuclear deal during his first presidency in 2018. No nuclear weapons. That is Trump's demand in a social media post on Wednesday. He warns Iran that time is running out to negotiate a deal. The president's post on Truth Social also refers to Operation Midnight Hammer. This was when 125 US aircrafts attacked 3 nuclear facilities in Iran during its 12-day war with Israel last June. His post also warns the next attack will be far worse. In response to this, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that the country's armed forces are ready, quote, with their fingers on the trigger. He is due to travel to Ankara for an urgent diplomatic effort by Turkey to steer talks preventing a US attack. Now, stay tuned as we examine the likelihood and legitimacy of US strikes on Iran, as well as the war its people are already enduring. US warships approach a nation already reeling from the government's brutal crackdown on nationwide protests. The protests began on the 28th of December when currency collapse triggered a wave of economic unrest that rapidly grew into calls for the end of Iran's theocratic regime. The weeks that follow have been dark ones. The regime unleashed the full power of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, and its paramilitary Basij unit. Despite the government's best effort to suppress information through an internet blackout and the mass detention and terrorization of its citizens, footage and testimonies trickling out of Iran have enabled international media to start building a picture of events. We collated some of the testimonies from witnesses inside the country.
Without any warning this time, they made a line and they straight to the face of people started shooting.
So did you see people drop to the ground then?
I did. I saw people on the ground. I saw blood. So I just started running.
There were a lot of people out there in the streets when I had to leave home. I don't know what to say, but the situation was very bad. Now that the internet connection is restored, we only now know that so many were killed.
This is Amir Ali Hadari, a teenager from the city of Kermanshah. He was shot and beaten to death.
He was shot in the heart, and as he was taking his last breath, they hit him in the head with the butt of a gun so many times that his brain was scattered on the ground.
We had to stand in the queue to go to find a beloved one in either in warehouse A or warehouse B. I saw 2 or 3, in some areas, 3 layers of people in black zipper. I saw small bags that they're throwing, and I realized that, oh my God, these are children's. When we went out of the main cemetery, I saw more trucks which they were in queue to unload these bodies.
Everything we have witnessed in our small villages or town or districts around us has happened in every inch of the country. It's a massive massacre.
A massive massacre. Security forces open firing on protesters, children among the dead, hospitals overwhelmed, a current death toll of between 5,000 and 7,000, though likely to be much higher, and untold others disappeared into prisons. Omid Memarian was imprisoned by the Islamic regime 20 years ago. He's a journalist and analyst covering Iran today, and he joins us now. Omid, welcome to MEELive. As we get a clearer picture of the brutal repression happening in Iran, I wonder what's been going through your mind. Would you tell us, at your discretion, about your experiences as a political prisoner and what you imagine those protesters are facing right now?
The situation is devastating. The whole nation is traumatized by hearing and witnessing the killing of tens of thousands of people. The numbers are increasing by the day. Now we are talking about 30,000 and even more people who have been killed within a few days, which is like, even though the Iranian government is very repressive and has killed so many protesters during the past years, but this is, even in the Iranian history, is unprecedented. So the whole nation is shocked by this round of violence, and there is a fear that the number of people who might be killed or be executed or be arrested would increase by, in the next few days, as the government is very much fearful of the another eruption of protests in the country.
Now, that 30,000 figure you quoted, that is one of the highest estimates, but it is coming from an effort by medics to actually try and identify. So, yeah, 30,000 is an estimate that has been cited. Omid, protesters have told international journalists that one of the reasons that many people found the courage to actually protest amid this repressive reaction was because they thought that they would receive protection from the US. Donald Trump said on January the 13th that help is on its way. 2 weeks later, thousands of protesters have been killed and no clear help has come. Did Trump betray these protesters?
That's a big question. Definitely Trump's tweet through social had a huge impact. I've talked to many people inside the country who said when they heard President Trump saying like we are locked and loaded and ready to support the Iranian protesters, they thought that the security forces might think twice using repression, killing people, or using their guns. But that actually did not. And when Iranians needed Trump to help them most, he didn't do anything. And definitely, I think he has a huge impact. Now, the U.S. Is getting ready for an airstrike against Iran, or somehow they're preparing to attack Iran. But we know that there is a lot of grievances when it comes to Iran and the U.S. And as they have mentioned in the past few days, they have Iran's nuclear program as one of their objectives. They have Iran's missiles program, Iran's proxies in the region, and other things as some of their targets. And also they are talking about targeting Iranian political leaders, or going after military bases, or those who have been involved in the crackdown on the people. But the fact is that those people who died in the past few weeks, they will never come back. The help never came, and what was said was had huge, grave consequences.
It sounds like while there is a betrayal potentially there, you have reservations about the US's intentions in actually intervening in Iran as we see these warships approaching. Is that accurate? Can I ask, where do you stand on US intervention in the current situation in Iran?
I will say that the Iranians' frustration is real. Their fear of more crackdown is real. That the fact that the Iranian regime is brutal and they kill protesters, they kill their own people is real. I've witnessed by firsthand that the Iranian government can commit violence at any level possible. That's very real. Their grievances are real. Their economy, the Iranian economy, is tanking, and people cannot afford a dignified life. These are all real things, and there is also no hope for a better future. The Iranian government has not shown any positive sign that there is something is going to change in the next few months or for the next few years. Iran is not negotiating with the United States when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. There's a lot of we have sanctions. There's corruption inside the country. There's repression. All that is true, but at the same time, when it comes to the Iranian people, we have different stakeholders with different agendas, with different objectives. That's the problem. That many of these people right now, they're talking about Iran, the Iranian people, and helping and supporting the Iranian people. I'm very fearful that some of these players, they have conflicting objectives, they have conflicting agendas, and some of these agendas might not even have anything to do with the Iranian people. And I'm very fearful that Iranians are asking for something, for a change that they might not have a role in shaping it, and they lose their agency when they go after, when they ask other powers to intervene. But I understand their frustration. You get to a point that there's no other. You're between a rock and a hard place, and you seek for help, whoever it is.
Yeah, you mentioned competing agendas are coming into play here. Can you just elaborate on what you mean by those competing agendas?
We have different players here. When it comes to Iran, we have different players. We have the United States. They have publicly said that they are concerned about Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missiles program, Iran's proxy groups in the region, and how they operate. So that's a different set of grievances that, for example, the Israelis have. Israel is a big player here. We don't know how much they are playing in this, how much playing they might have in this, how much they might play in the likely attack against Iran in the next few days or a few weeks. But Israelis have an agenda, and we are not sure about their objectives. But definitely Israelis, whether we have an Islamic Republic in Iran or any other government in Iran, or it was the Shah, Israelis prefer a weaker Iran. So that's a very different agenda.
But
and we have the opposition. They want to go back, overthrow the regime, and transition to a democratic society. Using foreign governments, foreign powers for such a thing, again, because they have different agendas. And for example, for the United States, bringing democracy to Iran is not an objective, or it's not their primary objective. And the U.S. has never done this before, and will not do in the case of Iran. But the fact that some people might think that they can, we have got to a point that all the interest of all these stakeholders is converging to a place that they can go in and overthrow the Islamic Republic. We have to see in the next few weeks. I think this is a big testing moment for all those people who have been advocating for this, and probably it's coming true for them. But there are so many concerns, there are so many unknowns in this area, that make many people very much concerned about the future of it, and the fact that Iranians might not have a role in shaping their future. They might lose their agency.
Right,
and all these
Omid, I hear
very
you.
organic protests.
I hear these risks, but I hear that there's a lot of concerns here about hypothetical futures, whereas we have a very unhypothetical reality right now in Iran. Thousands have been slaughtered. You yourself said that the regime has proven incapable of reform. It's been 20 years since you were imprisoned, and the repression today appears to be even worse. Is there a form of foreign intervention that you see as that you would see as helpful to the people of Iran, maybe even necessary for actual change to be achieved? Say that there was a sincere agenda, wouldn't some sort of intervention be necessary? Because nothing is changing. It's been weeks now, and the repression has only been getting worse.
That's very true. I've seen over the past few weeks, after particularly the mass killing of Iranian protesters, we are seeing more and more Iranians inside the country and outside of the country advocate for a humanitarian intervention. And they believe that there is no color more black than black. That's what they say in Persian. They believe that, you know, if they allow the Iranian government to go on as they have been doing like the past few days, the number of killing might increase enormously. So even the 2003 Nobel laureate Shirin Ebadi has advocated for the targeted military intervention. We have scholars who have been teaching non-violence for the past few decades. Now they are saying that, you know, there should be a targeted military intervention, so the Iranian regime gets a message that they cannot do anything they want to with the population. So yes, that has been a growing trend in Iran, inside Iran. Many people I've talked to in the past few days. I see more and more people waiting for a foreign military intervention of some sort, because they think that they are very defenseless when it comes to the Iranian government. And again, you know, I'm so shocked. Nobody has ever thought that we get to a point that 30,000 people die within like 24 hours, 48 hours. And I think that's something we have not even digested, the extent of it, the scale of it, the brutal nature of it. So I have to agree with you that, you know, there is a growing movement, there is a growing tendency, there is a growing voice inside Iran, outside of Iran, for a targeted military foreign military intervention, regardless of the concerns many of us might have. But that's the reality on the ground.
And if there is a successful targeted military intervention, or if there is a successful uprising inside Iran, what do you see as the best option for Iran going forwards, for that transition, that future that you have spoken about, alluded to, but, you know, in detail, I suppose, what would that look like to you?
Well, Iranians don't want to turn to Iraq 2003 or Syria 2016. They are hopeful that their struggle for democracy over the past few decades translate at this point and the transition to a more democratic, pro-development government, and, you know, basically overthrow the regime. That's what many people are hoping for. But again, because there are so many unknowns, many people have no idea that how it's gonna be materialized in the next few months, because after the military intervention can change a lot of equations, and those who in Iran who have power and guns and organization and can mobilize people, they would have an upper hand to shape the future of Iran. Whether Iranians move towards democracy or a democratic society after any likely attack, we have to see. And because we don't know about the scale of the attack, the scale of the U.S. military strike, and the objectives of the U.S. military strike, and so based on that, I think many different things might change.
Omid Memarian, thank you so much for your time today. Now, as we've just heard, even among Iranians with a shared desire for change, there is little unity about how to achieve it or what comes next. Hardliners on each side have sought to dominate the narrative and, in cases, delegitimize anyone who disagrees. They paint a black and white battle for the future of Iran as a choice between the deposed shahs and the reigning mullahs. It is a difficult climate to report in, and it makes it hard to identify what the majority of Iranians want. We can trace it back to two simplistic narratives of Iranian history playing out in today's debate, and they pivot around the 1979 revolution. The first narrative remembers the end of a corrupt and authoritarian monarch who presided over extreme inequality. This narrative says the last Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, depended for power upon a secret police at home and Western governments abroad. In this story, the ousting of the Pahlavi dynasty was a revolution that unified labourers and merchants, secularist intellectuals, and the Shia mullahs, and it rejected Western imperialism. The other historical binary mourns a pre-1979 era of rapid modernization, cosmopolitan liberalism, and oil wealth overseen by a constitutional monarch that, for one thing, allowed women to wear what they want. In this story, the 1979 revolution marks a moment of tragedy in retrospect, and a popular movement hijacked by theocratic rule. But is this binary debate distracting from what is presently at stake for the majority of Iranians? Today, while these two binaries are being played out in our news feeds, Iran once more stands on the possible brink of both a revolution at home and a war with an openly imperialist US president. Many Iranians who do not align with the regime, which dismisses protests as a foreign plot by the US and Israel, still see approaching warships or the return of the Shah as unwelcome futures for Iran. But for much of the opposition, what is happening now is not only a legitimate uprising with deep-rooted grievances, it is a singular opportunity, and Iranians simply cannot do it alone. Can Iran's opposition overcome its divides? And is the return of the Shah really their only hope of change? We are joined now by Alex Vatanka, director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. Alex, welcome to MEELive. Can I ask, do you feel the pressure of this binary narrative we've just laid out that sees the Shah as the only alternative to the mullahs?
Great to be with you, Mathilda. You laid it out so well. I think that is exactly what, the 70% or so of Iranians who were born after 1979, there is this, notion that before 79, there was development, there was freedom. And after 79, Iran became isolated, reactionary power with a theocracy at the top that refused to listen to its own people. There's a lot of truth in both. But end of the day, in terms of what comes next, that's exactly where the Iranians in diaspora certainly, but also inside of Iran, are trying to figure out what's the next step. I mean, the idea of the return of the Shah, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, that in so many ways is so seductive. You just basically you forget what has happened the last 47 years. You go back to 1979 and you carry on where you left off. Obviously, life is more complicated than that, and that's where people are divided. I think, not getting into discussing the Shah's track record. The fact is, Iranians today are desperate for a change of course. I think probably 85, 90%, if not more, can see that this regime has lost its way, want to change course. They do, if you could convince them that you can go back to 1979, I think you, in a referendum, will get a majority voting for that. But the problem is they're not convinced that it can be that easily done. They're convinced, or they're not convinced that you can have this orderly transition, without bloodshed, without chaos. And as we've seen in the region, political transitions in the Middle East tend to go, off the rails and end up being much more destructive than a lot of people initially think that would be the case. So long story short, you have a lot of folks, both in the diaspora and inside Iran, who see this as a sinking ship, who see the Islamist regime as essentially an illegitimate entity that has lost its way, and yet are waiting to see if there is a pathway forward to something that means political transformation, but without bloodshed and destruction.
Yeah, and obviously the context there that we cannot ignore is this statement by Donald Trump that there are warships ready and waiting. On the one hand, you've had weeks of protests brutally repressed, and it seems that change may not be possible without foreign intervention. But on the other hand, as we've just had laid out for us in our previous interview, there are various competing agendas in play. Agendas of the US, agendas of Israel, other actors who may not necessarily just be thinking of the interests of the Iranian people if they do intervene. How does that play into this picture you're painting of a transition that's desperately wanted by Iranians, but which looks very unclear and quite scary as well?
For the reasons you just laid out, exactly why we have this pause. I mean, again, this is a regime that goes out and kills its own children in the thousands. he has no right in the eyes of Iranian history, in the eyes of the people of Iran today, to be ruling over this country of 90 million. And yet, because exactly of what you laid out, there are these questions like, what are the Americans after? What are the Israelis after? Because, Iranian history has known many foreign powers intervening in their country, and often, if not always, for promoting their own interests as opposed to the interests of the Iranian people. So that Iranian reservation, which is a reality, shouldn't be ignored. It's creating this pause. But I also want to echo something we just heard earlier in the previous segment. The anger is so much that people who before would have said, no, foreign intervention is not the way forward. They're looking after their own interests. We should be looking after our interests. But there's so much anger, so much hatred for this regime, which the regime is guilty of having generated itself against itself, that people are willing increasingly to talk about picking up arms. 5 years ago, that was not what you would hear in the mainstream discussions about the future of Iran. Picking up arms in this day and age in the Middle East, where people see what happened in Syria or Yemen or Libya, and yet the anger, the hatred for this regime is so deep that more and more people are actually willing to even contemplate risking, tying their hopes to foreign powers whose agenda at best might serve some Iranian interest, but will be independent because they obviously pursue their own national interest, whether it's the United States or Israel.
But can they do it without foreign help? I mean, realistically, can the regime be brought to its reckoning if Iranians do not have military help from abroad?
I mean, we got to be careful, when we talk about foreign help. Not everything that comes from outside of Iran is necessarily a bad thing. The foreign countries can provide the tools, the means to Iranian opposition to organize themselves, to be better at mobilizing folks inside of Iran. I mean, there are lots of things you can talk about that isn't necessarily bad, but linked to foreign powers. But we're talking about a foreign power, for example, without naming names, a country that says, you know what, Iran simply as a country is too big. I want to take this opportunity to help certain ethnic groups inside the country, to arm them with the intention of breaking Iran into pieces, into smaller countries. That even if you have democracy in Iran tomorrow, I don't care, because I care about the size of this place being reduced, and we've achieved that, therefore it's a net gain for me. So, there's a spectrum when we talk about foreign intervention. There is the benign, in my view, where it can be very helpful. And then there is the more direct foreign interest that is not necessarily what the majority of Iranians want. But that's up to the Iranian people to figure out and not fall into any traps. I think the Iranians, again, going back to history, are very clear about their own history, their past grievances against foreign powers, and if they are able to mobilize themselves. And again, I say this in the context of an Iranian opposition that still engages these massive amounts of unhealthy infighting. If they can put that aside, start thinking clearly about what they want as a people, then the chances that foreign powers can exploit this moment would be significantly reduced.
You said, this is up to the Iranian people. Where do you see the role of the Iranian diaspora in all this? Because it sometimes seems as though there's potentially a little bit of a divide between diaspora. It's hard to tell, really. So, yeah, I wonder, where do you see the role of the Iranian diaspora in the battle for Iran's future?
Number one to point out is that this is a large diaspora. There are no precise numbers because it comes down to whether you count only people born in Iran as members of the diaspora or their offspring. But it's runs in the 6-7 million number, and it goes from North America to Europe to places like New Zealand, Australia. This is a global Iranian diaspora that cares, and it tends to be educated. It tends to be resourceful in terms of financial capacity to get engaged in politics. We see that here in Washington, D.C., where I'm speaking to you from. They're engaged. They're engaging their Congress members, senators, and so forth. So it's a diaspora that has something to bring to the table, but it's badly split along generational lines. All the Iranians who left around 79 tend to be more supportive of what President Trump is doing. Younger Iranians tend to be far more suspicious, partly because they have questions about Trump's political agenda overall. They don't look at Trump just as the guy who's looking at Iran, but they look at Trump as the American president. If they don't like him, they're not going to support what he does on Iran. So there's a vast spectrum here. But my bottom line is There's a lot that the Iranian diaspora can do in terms of making sure when the regime turns the lights off, when internet is off for weeks, that diaspora, because they know the place, they have language skills, they know the cultural context, all the rest of it, that they are the messengers, that they let the world know that massacres are happening inside that country shouldn't be forgotten.
And final question, look, compared to protests in the past, it seems as though while there is massive division among the opposition, there may be more unification than in the past around Pahlavi as the most viable alternative. You know, protesters have not just been chanting death to the dictator, they have also been saying long live the Shah and chanting Pahlavi's name. We can hear that. How realistic do you think it is that Pahlavi is in fact the plausible alternative, the only plausible alternative, and likely a far better alternative to the current government that has just slaughtered thousands of its own civilians in weeks?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. There has been a trend. The name Pahlavi is now being chanted in ways we haven't seen in previous years. That is, again, a reflection both of the anger in Iranian society against this Iranian regime, but also the good things that Reza Pahlavi has done in recent years to act as an inspirational leader. But I think he needs to do a lot more. I think he's got his work cut out for him. There are still plenty of people out there who are just fearing that, oh my God, we get rid of the theocracy and we go back to another absolute monarchy the way it was under the Shah. So the Reza Pahlavi and his team, they have the momentum. They have a lot of sympathy right now, partly because of what they've done, partly because of the nature of the regime, but they still have to sort of go out there and do much more than they have done in mobilizing a sort of an umbrella opposition across the board that, you know, brings in people that are Republicans and not monarchists. In that sense, what he needs to do is to sell himself more, not as a king in waiting, but as the most capable transition leader that can help take Iran from what it is today to something different and make sure that transition is as orderly as possible with few Iranians dying and certainly making sure the country doesn't descend into chaos. Because again, that's the fear so many have. And that's why they're sort of immobilized. They hate the regime, but they fear the idea of Iran falling into chaos. So again, Reza Pahlavi could do a lot. He is a name people recognize. He's got pedigree. He's inspirational in many ways, but he has to just make sure he can also be an organized opposition leader with maximum support and an agenda that's credible and people buy into it.
Alex Vatanka, thank you for joining us here on MEELive. And for today, that is all that we have time for. But before we lose you, we want to hear from you. Please send in your thoughts and questions to @MiddleEastEye on any social platform or email meelive@middleeasteye.net. We'll be here at 5 p.m. GMT, noon in New York, every Tuesday and Thursday. See you then.